Okay, welcome back. Today's week 5 of Shoes Brews Reviews. This is going to be the coronavirus public service announcement version. First of all, before we get into anything else, I just want to give a shout out to all the healthcare providers and all the folks, especially that are still providing, keeping the food supply chain full. And the people that are taking care of these folks who have been exposed to this virus, and it's a serious situation. So I'd like to make sure that at least I have an opportunity here to tell everybody, please observe any of the restrictions that have been put in place. Look, and you guys have known me for a long time. I'm not big on people telling me what to do, but this is a whole different animal. It's not anything to play with. So please, like I said, observe any local restrictions that are in place, and so on. So, again, it's not about you, it's about, in general, how to prevent this from spreading. So, all right, so I'm off the soapbox. Now, today we're going to talk about a couple of beers. The first one we're going to talk about is North Coast Scrimshaw. So, North Coast Brewing is out of Fort Bragg, California. They were established in 1988. This beer is a Pilsner at 4.7% ABV, 22 IBUs, so again, not real bitter. We talked about the IBU scale last week. This one is not so bitter. Again, it's a Pilsner, so it shouldn't be. But the cool thing about this beer is it's very full flavored. I've had this beer before. I really like it, and I want to share it with you guys. But 100 calories and 2 grams of carbs in a 12-ounce bottle. So it's, as far as a diet or anything, it's not going to wreck your diet. But it's a really good, full-flavored beer. They use we talked before, and I've said it a couple of times about the German purity laws, the Reinheitsgebot. This is pretty straightforward. It's Munich malt and 2 types of the noble hops that we talked about a couple weeks ago. So the Munich malt is, and we talked last week about the malt being kind of like the backbone of the beer, kind of dictates the style of beer that you're going to make. If you roast it and so on, how much you roast it, it indicates how dark the beer is going to be, and then it gives you some idea as to what kind of beer you're trying to make. But in case of this, Munich malt, this is a nuttier, like an almond, almost like an almond flavor to it. And the hops they're using are the Hallertau and the Tettnang, and both of those are dual-purpose hops. The Hallertau is a little bit more spicy, and when I say spicy, I don't mean hot. I mean kind of nutmeg, cinnamon type spice, and the Tettnang had kind of a citrus overtone. So it's going to end up, like I said, tasting almost like it's brewed as a Pilsner, but it almost tastes like a wheat beer. And keep in mind, when we talk about Pilsner, we talk about what a Pilsner is. A Pilsner is a type of lager. And, we've talked before about lagers and ales. And Pilsner, actually the name Pilsner comes from the town in which the type of beer was actually made in 1842 in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. Was the first place that this type of beer was ever brewed. And again, lagers didn't come around until the 19th century. Anything before the 19th century was an ale, because there were, again, we talk about lagers being cold fermented. The refrigeration process, as you guys, most people know, it was like ice. Here you go, and it wasn't like a mass production type refrigeration process or anything like that. So only in the 19th century and on did they start applying that technique, and then that beer kind of, that lager style kind of veered off from making ale. So anyway, like I said, Hallertau hops, Tettnang hops, and Munich malt. So a classic Pilsner should be it should be clear, but at the same time it should have, a little bit of spiciness in it. Talk about a mass-produced type Pilsner, the first thing that comes to mind is Miller Lite. This beer is not going to taste like Miller Lite. And again, it's not banging on Miller Lite. Now, I've drank, Christ, if I had another $1 for every Miller Lite I ever drank, I could quit working now. But as I get older, it's not about smashing a bunch of beers. It's more about enjoying the flavor of them and kind of drawing, this one versus this one and that type of thing. So, long story short on this, the flavor of the beer is much fuller, and with that Munich malt, it's a lot thicker as far as the mouthfeel goes. If you try this, you'll be able to immediately tell the difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bust this open. But one thing I want to maybe talk about real quick, while we talked about the lager, I talked about the refrigeration process, is the idea of keeping your beer, and when you serve a beer, kind of the temperature behind it. If you think about like a lager, like I said, these are brewed at or fermented at colder temperatures, and you want to serve them a little bit colder, but you don't want to get them too cold that you can't taste them. So beer normally will freeze around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, because the alcohol in them it's not like water, obviously. The alcohol would prevent it from freezing at 32. And the alcohol is what drives the freezing temperature of the beer, the freezing point, if you want to call it that. So the higher the ABV, the lower the freezing point will be. But in case of just an average, 28 degrees. But honestly speaking, in my experience, you get around 38 degrees, and anything colder than that, you can't really taste. It's just cold. You can't really taste it. So think about that as you're storing your beers or serving them or whatever. So in case of the Scrimshaw, like I said, I poured this straight out. You saw the head disappeared pretty quick, but this beer, and when I drink this and think about comparing it to like a mainstream beer like a Miller Lite or something like that, there is definitely more spice. And like I said, more, and not hot, but more herbal in this beer. It's a lot fuller as far as the flavor goes. The malt, the Munich malt, is much more robust, I guess is a good word to say. When it comes to the flavor of that beer, you can really pick out the nuttiness in that, and the backbone, or the flavor profile of the malt. So it's really, really good. I think if I'm gonna, and I keep this in my refrigerator, but anyway, like I said, this beer, definitely a step up from the Miller Lite, but please consider it if you're looking for, like I said, a 6-pack to put in the fridge or whatever, as an alternative, because of the caloric value. Like I said, 100 calories and 2 grams of carbs. This beer is really strong as far as that goes, and with the flavor you get, with the caloric value and the nutritional information I already shared, it's a really, really good option. So please consider this. Shout out North Coast. I mean, this beer is, like I said, for the style, it's really spot on. So if I think about the taste, I give it a 4 out of 5 on taste. The color, and you can see it. I mean, it's very golden, and that's what a Pilsner should look like. I mean, we've all drank beer before. We know that. As far as the aroma, there's, with the Tettnang, you smell this, and it kind of has, I don't want to say an orange flavor, but more like a lemon type aroma to it. But yeah, it's really good as far as the aroma and stuff. I'll go 4 on that. And as far as the bitterness, it's a Pilsner. Like I said, Pilsner is between 15 and 30 on the bitterness scale. It shouldn't have anything other than enough hop bitterness to offset the malt so it doesn't become like overly sweet. You don't want a beer that tastes like a freaking biscuit. So, and it does that. So I think, the balance is great. And when I talk about balancing a beer, that's what I'm talking about. The balance between the hops and the malt, and does it or does it not, do that, give it that good, balance between bitterness and sweetness. And in case of this, it really does. And so I'll go 4 on that. So I'm going to go 16 out of 20, and absolutely this is a an example of what a Pilsner should be. So yeah, I would say it matches that. So again, North Coast, great job. And guys, honestly, if you get, and this is available pretty much mainstream, so it's not like something you have to drive, 100 miles to find. You can find this at most retail grocers. So anyway, North Coast, spot on.